A Biden administration policy has been struck down by the court. A federal judge has temporarily blocked the implementation of the administration's water rule. Here are the details.
U.S. District Judge Daniel L. Hovland of North Dakota on Wednesday issued an injunction against the Biden administration's Waters of the United States rule. This comes at the request of a coalition of 24 states and more than a dozen industry groups. Late last year, the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, announced its final version of the water rule. It broadens what types of water sources were subject to federal regulation, covering thousands of small streams, wetlands, and other waterways throughout the nation. A coalition of 24 states led by West Virginia Attorney General Patrick Morrisey challenged the rule. They argued in a lawsuit that the new rule is an example of federal overreach and would unfairly burden farmers and ranchers. The judge agreed to pause the enforcement of the water rule while the lawsuit plays out. He wrote, "It would ensure that federal agencies do not extend their power beyond the express delegation from Congress." Morrisey celebrated the court's decision as a victory for state rights. The water rule is, in his words, a decades-long effort by the EPA to regulate purely intrastate waters without the explicit consent of lawmakers. The latest ruling comes less than a week after President Biden vetoed a congressional resolution that would have repealed the water rule. On Wednesday, the EPA said in a statement that it was reviewing the court's decision, but the agency stood by its new regulations.
And over to Florida. A record amount of rainfall hit the Fort Lauderdale area overnight, sparking a flash flood emergency. Governor Ron DeSantis declared a state of emergency in Broward County. Schools are closed and rescue teams are working to help those trapped by the flood.
We ran hundreds of water rescues in Broward County for people. Now, the majority of these people that were trapped and required rescue were actually in their vehicles. They misnavigated, misjudged the water height and water levels, and became stranded in their vehicles.
According to the National Weather Service, Fort Lauderdale tallied over 25 inches of rain in a 24-hour period, the rainiest day in its history. During the peak of Wednesday's deluge, a month's worth of rain fell in just 1 hour. The Weather Service is calling this a 1-in-1,000-year event. A flood warning was in effect for portions of Broward County until 4 p.m. today, and a flood watch is in effect through this evening. South Florida could still get more rain. Forecasters say gusty winds, small hail, and even isolated tornadoes are possible. Broward County Public Schools canceled classes today, and the Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport will be closed until 5 a.m. Friday.
The fire at a recycling plant in Indiana could burn until Saturday. That's what the local fire chief is guessing as firefighters continue to battle the blaze. The large cloud of smoke have residents concerned about their health. An evacuation order affecting over 1,000 people remains in place. NTD's Jeremy Sandberg has more on what officials are doing about it.
The industrial fire in Richmond, Indiana was so large at one point that smoke could be seen from space. City officials say they knew the site was a fire hazard, and the building owner ignored orders to clean up the property. The Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, says they're monitoring air quality and other environmental impacts in the area.
EPA was on site within hours of the fire, and overnight we began monitoring at 15 mobile monitoring locations.
EPA Administrator Michael Regan says federal personnel are helping state and local first responders with the emergency response efforts.
We're following the situation very closely, and we'll continue to provide the community with any assistance that they need.
Regan says a team is collecting debris samples in surrounding communities to find out if asbestos-containing materials may have left the site. The on-scene EPA coordinator says no toxic compounds have been detected from air samples outside the evacuation area and into part of Ohio. The local fire chief looked to extinguish rumors of the fire being left to burn and says the fire department is trying to put it out. He says the blaze is contained but not under control. The chief has set a goal to finish dousing flames by Saturday morning, but he says that's just a guess. Close to 2,000 people in a half-mile radius were told to leave their homes after the fire began Tuesday. An evacuation order remained in place Wednesday night. President Biden has offered additional federal assistance to respond to the fire if needed. Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
Good to have you back with us. Former UK Prime Minister Liz Truss has some stern words about French President Emmanuel Macron's recent visit to China. Truss says looking to communist regime leader Xi Jinping for a solution to the conflict in Ukraine is a mistake and a sign of weakness. She criticized Macron for his lackluster stance on Taiwan. NTD's Jeremy Sandberg has more on the former Prime Minister's comments.
The idea that we can treat China as just another global player is wrong. It is a totalitarian regime, and we need to adapt our policies accordingly, and we need to be.
Truss was speaking at the 2023 Margaret Thatcher Freedom Lecture hosted by the Heritage Foundation in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday. The former UK Prime Minister criticized French President Emmanuel Macron for his proposed stance on Europe, staying out of issues regarding Taiwan.
And supporting Taiwan is not a distraction from supporting Ukraine. Putin and Xi have made it very clear that they are allies against Western capitalism.
Truss believes looking to the leader of the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, for a resolution to the conflict in Ukraine is a sign of weakness. She says Western allies need to work together and be much more skeptical about statements and promises made by the CCP. The British politician condemned Macron and Ursula von der Leyen's recent visit to China.
I think it was a mistake. I think it showed a divide in the West which doesn't exist. And I also believe that we should be much, much tougher on supporting Taiwan at this juncture.
Truss says Macron is wrong to suggest Taiwan is not of direct interest to Europe, and that Europe should be doing all it can to support Taiwan in defending itself. The Chinese regime's military declared Monday it is ready to fight after it finished large-scale combat exercises and a simulated blockade around Taiwan. Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
In a different city, rats in New York City better beware. The city has just appointed a new commanding general to combat the little vermin, which are roaming the neighborhoods in huge numbers.
There's a new sheriff in town. And with your help, we'll send those rats packing. You'll be seeing a lot of me and a lot less rats.
Mayor Eric Adams announced yesterday that Kathleen Karate has been appointed New York's first ever rat czar. Adams has often expressed a deep hatred for rats. He posted the job last year, seeking someone somewhat bloodthirsty and ready for wholesale slaughter. Karate is not new to the rat-fighting game. The former Education Department employee previously oversaw rat mitigation efforts in the city's public schools. Official data shows that rat sightings have been on the rise in recent years. No exact figure on the city's rat population is known, but a study from 2014 suggests the figure is around 2 million. That equates to one rat for every 4 residents. Welcome back. A retired professor finds some old boxes filled with letters from days gone by. They provide a window into the lives of immigrants from over a century ago. The rare collection has been published in a book. Here's the story.
This book contains something the author says is impossible to find in any society and culture.
These are letters written by very ordinary people in their own words, and it's the kind of thing that is absolutely impossible to find anywhere.
Pat O'Malley, a retired historian, found boxes upon boxes of old letters in a family home. Many had been put away for over 100 years and simply forgotten. But to her, these letters are priceless.
Partly because it's my own people, and it says so much about my own background, my own heritage as an Irish American. Partly because I still remember some of these people I had known as a child.
Suddenly, the people she had only known from old pictures came to life. Her grandmother received letters from her friends that described their immigration to the U.S.
We're talking about their lives looking for domestics in the homes of wealthy Americans. And that to them is a complete revelation. To go from their little cottage on an island to moving to a big mansion. It's what turned them into middle-class Americans.
And as a historian, she also knows the value of such a rare collection.
They had already been hidden away for 100 years, so I have made sure that I have transcribed them so other people can read them easily.
She sent the letters to the Boston College Library archives, letters that reveal everyday lives in great detail.
What did the ordinary mother or father, ordinary farmer have to say about everyday life? And I spent about 20 years researching them, trying to figure out what they're talking about, who these people were, where the places were.
It was one day in the middle of the COVID pandemic when she decided to stop thinking about it and just put them all together into this book called So Far From Home.
So I put it together. There it is. This enormous book, 200 letters that are absolutely impossible to recapture anywhere else.
She says it's a great way to remember people since we will live as long as our memory lasts.
I think that's so touching, like learning how other people, especially your ancestors, lived in the past. Life was so different back then.
Oh yeah, and it's so touching, just like you said, hearing about those immigrants' journey from Ireland to the Great Melting Pot.